Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Season finale, season 3. Can you believe it?
No, time goes so quickly. It feels like yesterday that we did that first fake podcast. I was so nervous. I'd never done anything like that before. And now I feel like we're just hanging out.
Yeah, we do like minimal prep for these things. We show up. Hopefully that's not too evident in the quality of the episodes.
It may be evident in some of them.
I'm sure it is in some. But yeah, it is really crazy. It's funny. I was doing, as you know, I have a program called the Business Building Bootcamp, which I run for other coaches, where I help coaches, get unstuck in their businesses and build something that feels really resonant and meaningful for them. And one of the things we talk about a lot in that program is the idea of treating everything that you do as a solopreneur as a beta. So an opportunity to try it without a lot of expectations, certainly without any expectation of it being perfect right out of the gate, and then learning from that. And the best example of that I have in my life is this podcast, because that first episode was so much of a beta that I actually just called it my fake podcast. So yeah, it's kind of blown my mind that we're at the end of season 3. And, I've had some really cool things happen with this podcast, Sarah. And one of these, actually, I don't think I've shared with you. This just happened this week. I had someone approach me, send me a message around working with me in an area unrelated to drinking. But on my application form to work with me privately, because I work so often with women who are overwhelmed and burnt out and, using alcohol as their primary coping mechanism, there are questions about whether alcohol is an area of challenge for them and if they want to work on that. And then I ask them some specific questions about where they are in their relationship with alcohol. So everyone answers those questions, whether alcohol is an issue for them or not. And if it's not, usually it's just like an NA or something that gets written next to that. But this woman said, she wanted support around some specific areas. And then the question was posed around alcohol and whether that was a problematic area for her. And the answer was, nope, not since I listened to your episode this February that you did with the lady from Australia who had breast cancer. And I quit drinking right after that. And my husband quit drinking with me. And we haven't had a drink since.
Wow.
I know, right? And I thought, well, this is great, because I do get lots of really positive feedback about this podcast. And, of course, every once in a while, I get these just absolutely beautiful emails from people who have had where an episode has really, really moved them or felt really, really personal for them. So I know it's making a difference, but it is a free podcast. It does take a lot of work. You know that. You're here for maybe a quarter or a fifth of the episodes that I do, but this is a labor of love for me. So it was just really, really cool to get that message this week and think, wow, that's the person who told me that. And there are probably lots of other people out there who've had, made some really significant changes in their life or rethought some things as a result of the conversations that happen on Bite Size Balance. So that's super cool. Anyway, congratulations to that person if you happen to be listening to this podcast. Just think that's so excellent that you did that. Good for you. Yeah. All righty. So today we had a couple things we want to talk about. We had a topic that we have, it's been hanging around for many of our conversations, and we've wanted to work it in somewhere, and it just hasn't worked in naturally in any of the other specific topics that we've discussed this year. So we're keeping it as a separate topic, and we're going to talk about that. And then we also want to give people, I thought it'd be fun this year. We always do like a what we learned this summer episode at the beginning of the next season, which we will do for season 4. But I thought it would be interesting if we actually talked about what we're hoping to achieve this summer in this episode, and then we can come back and reflect on how well we did with that and what we learned about that. So we'll start with the topic, which I don't know if you want to introduce it. It was your idea to talk about this. This is something that you're really kind of fascinated with, and I am as well. And I think we both independently got interested in this idea or perspective, way of looking at things. And then I think, must have come together in one of our casual conversations as friends and realized that we both thought this was kind of a cool way to look at things, and that it was having a positive impact for us. And then that must have led to a discussion that led to this topic for the podcast. I can't even remember. Do you?
No, I don't remember. I mean, it's, as you say, it's woven kind of into everything. And it's really about asking yourself the question in your interactions with other humans about whether or not everybody's actually just doing their best. That's what people are bringing to their daily life. And I grew up in a family where there's lots of cynicism and kind of self-deprecation and, you know, humor around that. And when I started thinking about looking at people's lives through the lens of maybe everybody is just doing the best that they can, I found that my judgment went way down. It just felt so much lighter to see the world from that perspective, to see our interactions with people from that perspective. And it's hard to do every day with every interaction, for sure. But I find that it just, for me, it takes my nervous system down a notch.
That makes sense.
If I assume that everybody's just doing their best, and it also gives me the permission to just do my best as well. So it's a funnel into self-compassion.
So this idea, we'll give you some specific examples of this, because when I explain this to clients, it often doesn't make a ton of sense until I start giving them sort of specific examples of how I use it to change the way I view situations with other people, and also how I use it as a tool for self-compassion, like you just said. But it comes from Brené Brown. So this is not our idea. This is a Brené Brown concept. And I heard it first when she was telling the story about how she was, and I'm not going to get it quite right, but basically the very short synopsis is she was asked to go speak at an event, and they assigned her a roommate, and she didn't push back on that, even though that's very unusual for her to have a roommate. She, was the keynote speaker and constantly traveling and all of that. But she went to this hotel and she had a roommate, and the roommate was really, really hard for her to live with. Literally, the roommate was so different from her, and she really struggled with this person's approach to life and personality and all of that, and found herself getting very, very angry with this person and the way that she was behaving. And that led to, I think, a conversation with her therapist eventually. She really carried a lot of anger around this, and her therapist proposing her this question of like, what if this person is just doing their best? And I think the story goes that Brené sort of in the first instance rejected that completely and said, like, that can't possibly be true. There's no way this person could be doing their best. This can't be anybody's best. The behavior was so abominable, and then just kept getting asked this question over and over by this person, and eventually had a moment where she thought to herself, what would actually be different? What if this person was doing their best? How would that shift things for me? And it shifted everything for her, just like it does every time I ask myself that question with some real earnest and really like try to sit in it and really give it some weight with people. So the way that I use it, I use it in lots of different ways, but I use it both in external relationships, and I use it in my relationship with myself when I find myself getting really self-critical of myself. And I also use it in my practice. So as a coach, I use it all the time. But when I'm using it sort of externally with applying it to somebody else in my life, to someone who's frustrating me or whose behavior just feels like totally out of line to me, I say to myself, what if this person is just doing their best? Or what are the chances this person is just doing their best? I always come back to this place, because I have a really this probably won't surprise you, Sarah, you know this, and probably won't surprise anyone listening either, but I have this brain that works in a very rational way. I always have to prove everything. And so I've worked my way through this so many times, and I just can't see how it can possibly not be the truth that everybody is showing up doing their best every day. We all get up out of bed. We don't walk out the door thinking, I'm going to go piss a bunch of people off today, wreak a whole bunch of havoc, and try to get as many people as possible to not like me. It's just not what we do. We all go out the door. I think we all it's the same. We're all like, hope today's a good day. Going to do my best to make it a good day, So even the people who are just, really just miserable a lot of the time, I think they're not doing that. They're getting up and they're hoping that today's a good day. They always want the day to be good. And so if you assume that, what it does when someone is making you angry or you don't understand why they're behaving the way they are, it immediately shifts you out of judgment and into empathy. It moves you straight into that place of empathy, which is it's just so different because it takes all of the anger away and suddenly you're trying to understand them. Suddenly you have some compassion for them. You're trying to create that. And that, of course, completely shifts the way you feel because compassion and empathy feels a whole lot better than anger and judgment. Yeah. So it changes the way you feel, but it also directly impacts the way you interact with them, which leads to a higher likelihood of a meaningful conversation and actually making some progress. So that's what we're talking about. We say, what if everybody's just doing their best? It's this idea of like, what if that's true? And what if we went through life with that lens instead of with, I think, the default lens that a lot of us go through? And Sarah and I are not being judgmental here. We both did this for a long time. I definitely did that for a really long time. And I've also spent a lot of time reflecting on how much of that is related to the state of general overwhelm and unhappiness that I was in for so long, where I was comparing myself to everyone else all the time. And somehow maybe it felt good to me to find people who weren't doing it as well as me because I felt so incompetent myself a lot of the time, And I don't know whether the shift into midlife and all of the piece that's come with that you and I talk about so much here around like moving through menopause and becoming an empty nester and all that. I don't know how much of that has contributed to the ease with which I can now apply this test, if that makes sense. I think it's probably related, but that's what we're talking about. So I just wanted to give people an example so they know, like, what are some of the ways that this shows up for you, Sarah, and that this helps you?
Well, I have to be honest and say that this is not a daily thing, that this does not guide my everyday. I would like it to guide my everyday. It is something I have to remember to do. This is sure. And I think that it's probably a practice that will be my whole life and I think that's probably normal for everybody. And there's a sort of continuum of how, depending on how you're feeling about yourself and whether or not you're giving yourself enough grace and whether or not you're allowing yourself the self-compassion of, I am doing my best. I think it's easier to come from a place of, I feel like I'm doing my best when looking through that lens at other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So if I'm in a state where I'm not doing that for myself, it's very difficult to do it for other people. And I tend to get I'm more easily triggered into judgment.
Yeah. I think it's a really good example of the neural pathways that I talk about a lot as a coach. The idea that, I certainly had done something completely different for decades. This was not my default pathway. I had another pathway, which was, what is the matter with this person? That was my default pathway. Like, why are they behaving this way? This makes no sense. So it's a brand new pathway, which means that those neurons in my brain, the first time I did this, it was like all new for them and they didn't know each other yet because they never fired together. And, the more times you practice it, the more opportunity those neurons have to connect and fire together and the stronger this pathway becomes. And so I think it's like everything else. And that's why I have really accepted the word practice instead of resisting and hating that word like I did for so many years. I hated the word practice. I hated it when people talked about their yoga practice or their meditation practice or their this practice. I'm putting this in air quotes for anyone who's not watching me, and I will fully admit that. And now I can see, no, practice is exactly the right word, because you have to do this over and over and over again. And the more you do it, the more likely your brain is to go find that pathway itself. And it just becomes a little less conscious and a little bit easier. And I would say it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was introduced to this idea, this like question of what if everybody is just doing their best. And I have been working on it myself now for maybe like I said, 4 or 5 years. And it's much more natural for me now to go there than it was 5 years ago. And I think I just wanted to raise this today and plant the seed in people's brains and say, hey, if this isn't something you're using as a tool in your relationships or in the way that you talk to yourself, try it on for size this summer and see what happens when you do this. I mean, just treat it as an experiment. The next time someone really irritates or enrages you, ask yourself, like, okay, how does how I'm feeling shift if the truth is this person's doing their best right now?
Yeah.
And I always say to my clients, like, your best is not the same every day. Your best is dependent on a whole bunch of factors, a lot of which we talk about on this podcast. It's dependent on whether you're about to get your period and you're super cranky, whether you're menopausal and you haven't slept in 3 weeks, whether your kid said something to you this morning that really hurt your feelings, whether you ate a good breakfast, whether you're like, you're also trying to cope with work stress and supporting an ailing parent right now. Like, it depends on all kinds of different things, what your best is that day. And I do think we need to recognize that it's going to shift on a daily basis. But if you assume that somebody is showing up today, doing their best, just like you are, what does that do? And how does that change the way you feel? And just pay attention to that. I mean, one of the first questions that I end up asking myself when I do that is, oh my gosh, if that's the truth, what happened to them?
Yeah.
And it might be like, what happened to them today? Like, it could just be like, what happened? Something has happened today to put this person in this state where they're behaving this way. Yeah. But it could be like, what happened to them, like in the bigger sense of the word. Right. And that's really, for me, helping me move into that compassion and closer to a place of empathy.
I would say a good experiment. I think that for people just starting out, it's hard to go from being super annoyed by, say, someone's behavior to that place of empathy right away. I think it's a good experiment, but I also think part of a good experiment is to, like, just go to the grocery store, but you're not annoyed. Well, the grocery stores can be annoying, but when you're not sort of super annoyed, just go to the grocery store and look at everyone, the people you're interacting with, the people you're moving past in the aisle, the people you're asking a question of, or who are checking you out, and practice seeing them through the lens of they're doing their best. And I think that, like, putting it into low impact situations is also really helpful, because it sets the stage for when you then do have a higher impact situation. You have some practice, as you say, you've nailed down those neural pathways, or you laid them down, not nailed.
Yeah.
I think that if you do, like, if I even imagine going into the grocery store and, like, putting on my empathetic lens, putting on my everyone's doing their best lens, my experience at the grocery store is a totally different experience than it would be if I'm, like, rushing around, not really being present. And it also comes back to being present, right? If you're actually looking at people around you through that lens, then you are also being present to what's happening in your body.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. That would definitely happen. And I like the idea of practicing on strangers. And it's actually sometimes it's really helpful too. I mean, we go back to your Costco incident, as you said that about the grocery store. That's what I was thinking inside. I don't know if you who are listening right now have heard the episode where Sarah talks about her Costco incident, but she was not practicing this in that moment when she lost her mind on the poor woman who was trying to get her to sign up for some kind of credit card or something. But it is helpful to practice it in those moments too, because the other thing that is really interesting about this is that this is also connected to how much cortisol you produce and how stressed you are as a human being, right? So I will, when I talk about this idea of cortisol jackers and paying attention to the little things in your life that are just, jacking you up and getting you stressed out. And I always say to people, these are the things you can control and change. This is the way that you can actually help to prevent burnout, is by learning what those smaller, more regular triggers are, the things that, you really are choosing to respond to in the way that you're choosing to respond to, and they're actually pushing you into fight or flight and creating some cortisol. The cumulative impact of all of those little things in your week can be as big as one big stressful thing that happens that's actually completely outside of your control. So focus on the little stuff. This is that, don't sweat the small stuff, fridge magnet. It actually is very good advice. But the truth is, a lot of my cortisol jackers are people, right?
Yeah.
They're like these people who do these things, and some of it's so, so small, but it makes me annoyed when the cashier doesn't know the code, which is like even extra doubly bad because my daughter's actually a cashier at a grocery store now. But those types of things, and just stepping into that place of like assuming the person's doing their best and they showed up today and they want to have a great day just like you, and they're not trying to be cranky, or something's happened to them this morning that's led to them feeling this way, also changes the way I respond. So instead of going into that fight or flight, cranky, annoyed state, I stay calm in that moment. So it serves you that way as well to practice this.
I would even argue that you become more calm.
Yeah.
That you go from neutral to like a level down, because you're actively practicing love, really.
Yes.
So you are flooding your body with compassion and empathy for someone else, which is also flooding your body with compassion and empathy for yourself, ultimately. And so it's actually a tool to reduce your stress.
Yeah.
As opposed to just sort of trying not to elevate it.
Mm-hmm. And I use this with my kids. I mean, we did an episode on parenting teens, which interestingly, Sarah, one of our most popular episodes is that episode where we talked about our experiences parenting teens. People really loved that. I got so much feedback for that from that episode, and it's been shared a lot. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, go back and listen to that episode. It was this season. But we didn't talk about this when we were talking about raising teens, and this is something that I use with my kids. I do try to assume when my kids are behaving in a way that doesn't feel like the way I would hope they behave, that they're also doing their best. And that I'm not, because my kids are young adults, I'm just not aware of everything that's going on in their lives anymore, nor should I be. And so when they show up that way, there's probably something that's happened to them that's causing them to be where they are today. And I try really hard to remind myself of that, and that changes the way that I relate with them. And it also reduces my stress as a parent.
Yeah.
And it allows me, I have some tools, which we did talk about, I think, in that episode, but things that I do with each of my kids, because based on experience, like I know that with my daughter, she's a lot like me, and she prefers to work things through a bit her own. She likes to have some space to process. She's not a quick processor necessarily. And she'll get into a mood and she needs some time to get out of that. And if I just give her the time to get out of it, she'll get out of it. And then there's no pain to either one of us, or I can like dig into it and start poking her, and that'll turn into, stress for both of us. So I do use this in parenting a lot. I also use it as a coach. I use it at work. I use it in my practice. I love my clients, but it's just the way it is. People show up sometimes and I think, why is this, what's happening here? But the assumption that everyone's doing their best is a really helpful way to just level that back out for me. And then I also teach my clients this because it's such an effective tool, as we just talked about, in terms of self-regulating your own nervous system, but also creating more meaningful, connected relationships, and just generally having a more joyful day. Yeah. Your day sucks. If you're going through your day with judgment and anger and criticism and frustration because of the way other people are behaving, which, by the way, you have zero control over anyway, then that doesn't make for a very pleasant day either. So we do talk about that, but I think the most important place that this plays out for my clients is in what you were talking about, which is then taking that practice inward and starting to really try to default to, what if I'm just doing my best here? Mm-hmm. Because I think I personally, and I believe that everyone else I know does this too. I believe every human does this, that we just show up for things and we take all of the information we have, everything that's happened to us, both in our entire lives and in the last few hours. We take all of that and we run it through this like big computer in our brain, and we try to figure out what the best thing is to do in that moment. And we've got emotions and biochemical responses and all of these things happening, and we're just doing our best in that moment to deal with that thing. Yeah. And sometimes with reflection, we can see that it didn't serve us, and that there might have been a different choice we could have made that would have served us better. But I think in that moment, we're always doing our best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you can really try and have that lens for all of your interactions, it can't help but better your life.
Yeah.
I wanted to, something came up when you were talking about the idea of having, well, just what we were talking about, is everybody doing their best around, I'm just kind of processing, like, how do you work with boundaries around that? So I think, and I'm just going to talk off the cuff here because I'm just kind of processing it myself. I think part of the fear of assuming that everybody's doing their best is also a fear that if you give people that leeway, that they will take from you. Am I making sense at all? That there's some sort of, that if you allow for bad behavior, then you will become the victim of bad behavior.
Oh yeah, I think we need to be clear too. Like, I don't see this as somebody gets to behave the way they behave, and I never put boundaries up around that. But what I do try to do is do that with some compassion and empathy. So it might be like, for example, take a thing, my poor daughter's going to get thrown under the bus on this one. I'm just going to make up something here, but like, if she was behaving and she'd said something kind of like rude and snappy to me, and it was just like totally not okay. But I could, I'm thinking to myself, she's doing the best she can right now, and I have to look at this through that lens. I'm not going to not say to her, you really just hurt my feelings. I hope that you'll think about that and come back and apologize to me. But also, I think maybe I'm just going to go, for a bit. Like, I'm not suggesting that, and it certainly isn't the way I apply it in my own life, that we just let people be, walk all over us or hurt us, and we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
But so I think it's still really important, because I also think the other fear that comes with this is, well, if I just assume everybody's doing their best and I'm doing my best, then does that mean that there is nothing better than that? And that there's no reason to try to grow and change and improve and all the rest of it. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think when I'm doing my best, I am trying to notice when I'm not doing my best so that I can do better the next time. I don't think it's that your best stays the same for your entire life. I mean, I think the goal is to be, for me, I think the meaning of life is sort of twofold. It's to enjoy the passage of time, which I've talked about a million times, but it's also to continue to grow and evolve and change and meet new people and do new things and all of that. And so I think you could take this as an excuse to just stay the same and not change and not improve and not have to apologize for your behavior and all the rest of it. And I don't think that that's part of this at all in my framework for it, but I can see I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it can apply to a situation with a parenting, but it also could apply to the larger world out there and how people are being treated. And so I think it's okay to continue to have a lens of empathy, while at the same time, part of that empathy for yourself is by erecting healthy boundries.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like actually part of the equation.
Yeah. I think it allows you, for me, it also creates more space for me to respond instead of react. So I will have a more reasoned response to it. If someone has done something that is upsetting to me or frustrating to me, and I'm stepping into this assumption that they're doing the best they can in that moment, it just gives me more space to think about, is this worth responding? Could I care less? That other thing I talk about, like, what if I just chose to not care right now? Could I meet them? Can I meet them with kindness, which is one of the things I really try to do when someone's in an obviously bad mood, especially strangers. I try to meet them with kindness. If they're cranky or whatever, I will try to say, have a nice day, or I hope your day gets better, or something like that. I'd like to believe that it's not me being smug, but sometimes I just like, it's so irritating to me if someone's in a really cranky mood with me that I'll do that, because somehow it's probably self-serving for me as well. But I think it serves other people too. And hopefully most of the time when I do it, it's really genuine when I'm doing that. But it allows me to do that. Whereas if I wasn't thinking that way, I would just respond, and I'd probably respond with a cranky retort. I wouldn't. So yeah, I don't know. It's something that you and I've talked about a lot, and it's never made its way into this podcast. And I thought, this is a good thing to end the season with,
Totally.
as something for people to take away if they haven't heard of this before, been thinking this way. Just like, what if everyone is legitimately just showing up every day and doing their best? How does that shift things for you? How does that shift things for how you think about them? And what if the same is true for you? That's really where the gold is in this. You know, and you hear that voice in your head criticizing you, that inner critic, which, you know, we talked about on the episode that I did this year with Lorna Wilson. Also a super popular episode on inner critic and feedback and praise and criticism as a woman. Go listen to that if you haven't listened to that one. But this is a great way to really calm that inner critic down too. You say, look, yeah, granted, I'm looking at this, I'm feeling like there was a different way to do this that would have served me better. But what if in this moment I was just doing my best?
Yeah.
It's like it de-escalates the whole thing. It almost neutralizes it. Now you're in a place where it's like, okay, all right, what could I do differently next time? And how can I set myself up for a greater chance of doing that, of handling this differently, of seeing this through a different lens, of doing something different.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Yeah.
totally agreed.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first thing we wanted to talk about. And then before we wrap up today and we start on our summer, well, we're actually recording this a few weeks before this will air, but I thought it would be fun and interesting to just talk about our plans for the summer, because actually, Sarah, you've been really helpful in helping me get clearer on what I want for myself this summer. And that has involved doing some things differently than I've done in summers past. And I'm just curious to know what your plans are for this summer. We're in different places in our lives. I have 2 kids home, but they're 19 and they look after themselves and they're both working. So it's a different scenario. And you've got kids who still need more supervising and driving and all the rest of it. But for me, the main things that I'm hoping to, it's really like how I want to feel this summer, I guess, is like an alignment with that word that I talked about in September that continues to be my word. And I'm not sure it's ever going to change. I don't know if I'm going to be one of those people who has a different word every year. This idea of really stepping into agency again. And it's just been so great for me to start thinking of myself as an autonomous human being again. It's been so long since I felt that way. I want to work less. That's my number one thing. And I have a habit of talking about working less in the summer. And then, you know, I take the summer off the podcast every year and all of that, but then I just end up filling the time with other work stuff. And this year I don't want to do that. And I had said to you, well, Sarah, I'm committed to taking every Friday off. And you said, well, what would it look like if you took, I think you said like every Monday off too, or what if you took, you know, if you just blocked off time, and then, you know, that you actually proposed to me the very radical idea, which was too radical for me. What if you just didn't work this summer? What if you took the whole summer off? Which is what got me thinking about what I did actually want in terms of my work schedule. I mean, one of the gifts of being a solo business person is that I do actually get to decide that, and I can schedule my year so that I make the majority of my income in the other months of the year so that I can work less in the summer. So I am committed to Mondays and Fridays off, and they're blocked off in my schedule. I will not be seeing any clients on Mondays or Fridays this summer, the entire month of July and August. Also, I run this group coaching program for coaches, and we have together had conversations around this. And I've said to them, look, we're just going to do, instead of doing 2 calls a week this summer, we're doing 1 call a week. And I've really lightened my load over there as well. And I have been not actively marketing, if that makes sense. So I've consciously not been trying to get a bunch of new people in July and August, which means that my client load is still pretty significant, but it's not what it normally is. I'm normally very, very busy in my private practice and have a wait list. And I've been able to shift that for the summer. So it's really doable for me to just work Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays this summer, which allows me to do these things. These are my goals. I would like to go to the beach more. I really enjoy the ocean, and I don't get there enough, which is crazy because I literally live on the ocean, so it's bonkers. So I'm going to go to the beach more. I really want to enjoy as much time as I can with my kids. So we are going to a family wedding in September, or in July together, which will be fun. And we're taking a vacation at the end of the summer to Vancouver Island, where my husband's family lives, which I'm really looking forward to as well. So I want to spend time with my kids when they want to be with me. I want to be available for that this summer. And my West Coast BFF is coming for the month of July. And I want to spend time with her. And I really want you and her and me to spend time together because she hasn't met you and you haven't met her. And I'm really looking forward to that. So those are my goals for the summer. Work less, go to the ocean more, hang out with my people more.
Okay, so the feelings that I want to have during the summer and at the end of the summer are, I want to feel rejuvenated, clear-headed, and restored. And I think you know, but nobody else does probably, that I struggle with sciatica sometimes, and I'm in a flare-up right now. And historically, for me, that has always been an indication that something is wrong. So in my life, I'm either doing too much, I'm not doing the kind of self-care that I need, I'm traveling in the wrong direction, something is up. And before this gets out of control, this time I've decided to take my own advice, and I'm basically going to do nothing this summer. And I really want to create the space. I really want to create times of like intentional rest for the sake of rest not for the sake of, or not because it's a reward for something. I want to really work on my shoulds. I want to work on the narrative in my head around what I should be doing. I made a little list here, but that's pretty much that. Those are the main things. Like I just really want to stop. And because I have kids that need drives and camps to drive to and all that stuff, summer can get busy. And actually there are times when I have felt that the summer is busier for me than it is at other times. And I'm just gonna, in the things that I can control around that, I'm actually just gonna choose to do the things I want to do. And I have more space this year, which is good. And, every year I get more space. Mm-hmm. And, I'm going to do things like yesterday, I had 20 minutes before we had to go to a graduation thing to make a supper because, well, the kids needed to eat. And I literally fried some tofu and threw it in a wrap with some vegetables. And I thought to myself, it wasn't for me, it was for the kids. And I thought, every single meal I make these children this summer is going to be in a wrap or a sandwich. I was like, this is perfect. I can put anything in a wrap or a sandwich and they don't care. The kitchen doesn't get hot. It's a little bit hot from frying the tofu, but nothing like, turning the oven on. And they can walk away. It's fewer dishes. And it took me 20 minutes. And I didn't have to even think about it. I was just like, protein, vegetables, carbohydrate, here you go. And so I decided that every meal that I make is going to be handheld.
Love it.
So yeah, I'd like to do my ways of accomplishing this are going to be to really just have I've just really decided to have no pressure to accomplish anything. And that's going to be really hard for me. Yeah. But also when I make those statements to myself in my head, everything in my body calms down. So I see this summer as kind of a gift. I turned 54 on July 2nd, and that's my birthday present to myself, basically, is a summer doing absolutely nothing. So I'm going to read, I'm going to swim, I'm going to spend time in nature, I'm going to hang out with you, my other friends. I'm going to do nothing.
Awesome. I love it. Let's end with, I'm putting you on the spot, but I just thought of this as you were talking about reading. Let's end with together, let's try to come up with 5 or 6 really great books that we've read that if people are looking for things to read this summer, things that we recommend. So my number 1 book this year is a book called Demon Copperhead, written by Barbara Kingsolver. You read it after I read it, I think, right?
Amazing. Pulitzer Prize here, I think.
Yeah, won the Pulitzer, and beautiful book. Like, if you liked the Poisonwood Bible, this is nothing like the Poisonwood Bible, but man, can she write. It is such a beautiful, moving book, and so well written. So that's called Demon Copperhead, Barbara Kingsolver. What do you got? What have you read?
I just read American Dirt.
Oh, also good. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Great book.
Read Cloud Cuckoo Land.
Also, yeah, I haven't read that yet. Yeah.
So those are definitely some of my favorites. Yeah. I'm just trying to think. I really forget books as soon as I
If you like a book, like a beach read, it is where you're going into the summer here. So like just a really light, fun read, but cleverly written and really entertaining, and you kind of can't put it down. I've really loved Emily Henry's books this year. So there's a book called Book Lovers, which is like just a little romantic comedy, but just smart. And I can't stop reading them when I start them. So she has a few. One's called Book Lovers, and for whatever reason, I'm drawing a blank on the other ones, but there are many, so you could look her up. She's great. And then I was just reminded of, oh gosh, and now I'm going to forget the name of it. The book, Sarah, where the woman goes to the cottage in like I want to say it was Nantucket.
Oh, it's by Ellen Hildebrand,
yeah.
or
No. The one where she goes, the Paper Palace.
Oh yes, amazing.
Yeah, the Paper Palace. I also really loved that book. And I can't remember who wrote it.
That wasn't this year, but that's another really.
Sarah and I both loved The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai, Makkiai. And then I also read her more recent book this year, which is, I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it's called I Have Some Questions for You. Completely different than The Great Believers, but really good. So I did enjoy that one as well. More of a like, what do we call it? Whodunit sort of inquiry into human nature, and I don't know. Anyway, very, very different from The Great Believers. And then I'd go back to my favorite books of all time, The Kite Runner, and also A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mystery. So now I'm just throwing out all the classics, and A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. You can't go wrong with any of those. So listen, I wanted to say thanks, Sarah, for being here so often this year on Bite Size Balance. I really appreciate you. And I love having these conversations with you. And I know I'm going to see you over the summer, so I don't need to say anything more than that to you. But I do want to say to everyone listening, we hope that you have a really great summer, and that the summer brings you all the things that you want. And just my like last little words of wisdom as a coach, if you don't think about what you want for this summer and set some really clear intentions on how you want to feel, and then think about what needs to happen in order for you to feel that way, it probably won't happen. And you'll end up at the end of the summer thinking, oh, there's another summer gone and I don't know where that went, and I wish I'd done this, or I wish I'd done that. So my wish for you is that doesn't happen this year, and that you actually get conscious and mindful about how you want to spend your summer. And we will be back in September with episode 1 of season 4, and we'll let you know whether we had any success with our intentions. Okay. Thanks, Sarah. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. Ready to create a life you don't want to escape from? Download your free Blueprint for Change now. This incredible workbook includes some of my favorite coaching tools and will help you get clear on what you need more and less of in your life. Grab it at www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint. That's www.wendymccallum.com/blueprint.